What would you think if I told you that the most dangerous forms of seduction are not physical at all, but psychological? That the very behaviors women are often taught to suppress are the same forces that can unravel a man's defenses, override his logic, and chain his desire? Most women think attraction is about beauty, charm, or pleasingness. But Jung revealed the darker mystery, the feminine shadow. And it is here, hidden in unspoken traits, where power bends men's will. 1. The forbidden magnetism of mystery. Why the unseen holds him hostage. Why does the unseen seduce more fiercely than what is offered openly? Because desire is not born in satisfaction, it is born in tension. A woman who cloaks herself in mystery creates an unconscious pull a man cannot rationally resist. His mind fills the spaces she leaves blank. His fantasies chase what she withholds, not what she reveals. Many women collapse their power by oversharing, by explaining, by exposing the mechanics of their soul too soon. They do it from a hunger for reassurance, to be understood, to be accepted, to earn closeness. Yet when everything is handed over without cost, mystery evaporates, and with it, respect. A man may stay, but only as one stays where there is no challenge, no hunt, no fire left to pursue. Such relationships flatten into complacency, leaving women unfulfilled and men ungrateful for the very devotion poured upon them. This is not deception. Mystery is not a mask. It is a mirror. It reflects back to the man the corridors of his own unconscious. He is forced to wrestle with projections, imagining, speculating, yearning. Jung teaches that projection is the birthplace of both love and obsession. When a woman anchors herself in an aura that is not easily decoded, she awakens these projections fully. Suddenly, she is not just herself. She becomes the canvas upon which his shadow paints. But mystery must be grounded in substance, or it collapses into emptiness. The woman of depth is not silent for manipulation. She is silent because some parts of her are too sacred to display cheaply. She holds back because she knows not everyone deserves the entirety of her essence. Such restraint is magnetic. The woman who belongs to herself first is always irresistible. Picture the ancient priestess in her hidden temple. Men traveled miles, risking life to glimpse a single prophecy, a single word from her lips, not because she was easy to reach, but because she was not. A lioness never reveals her hunt until the prey has already been ensnared. So imagine yourself now, standing in conversation, not spilling everything, but smiling with the calmness of one who holds secrets locked within her. Do you feel the shift? That weight in the room as others lean in toward your silence? That is magnetic power. You do not seduce by presence alone, but by the echoes of what you will never fully unveil. And yet, mystery by itself can become a veil for fear. To sustain desire, there must be more, the alchemy of tension. Which brings us to the next truth. 2. The erotic weight of emotional restraint, the power of not collapsing. Why is the woman who does not rush emotionally so dangerous? Because men are conditioned to expect women to yield quickly, to confess, to cry, to wrap themselves vulnerably around his validation. When she does not, when she can sit in her emotions without flinching or spilling them out prematurely, it destabilizes him. That which cannot be easily conquered triggers the deepest instinct to pursue. The tragic conflict many women face is the belief that emotional openness equals intimacy. They confuse overexposure with connection. They believe if they rush into declarations, if they bear their pain too soon, it will forge closeness. Instead, it collapses the tension that fuels attraction. A man who does not have to earn emotional access will not protect it. What comes cheaply is discarded carelessly. Unawareness of this truth creates endless suffering. Women give too much, too soon, and wonder why the devotion does not return. They cry in the arms of men who have not proven themselves safe. They stitch men into the fabric of their vulnerability without discerning if he even deserves its warmth. This becomes a cycle of disappointment, of giving away power under the illusion of intimacy. The empowered path is restraint, not as a game, but as sovereign self-control. Jung calls this individuation, the mastery of emotions rather than enslavement by them. When a woman allows herself to feel fully yet waits before revealing, she builds the muscle of sovereignty. She teaches her nervous system patience. She becomes unshakable. Men feel this weight. They lean in, not because she spills herself, but because she doesn't. The mythic symbol here is Pandora's box. The world lusted to know what it contained. Curiosity was unbearable. One held breath, one trembling hand, all desperate to open it. But the true power was never in the contents. It was in not opening too soon. Visualize this. You're in conversation with a man who expects you to confess. Instead, you pause. You smile, but say little. You feel everything inside, but reveal only what you choose. Can you sense how his attention sharpens, how his energy bends toward you? That is the grip of restraint. She who governs herself cannot be governed by another. And yet there is an even more volatile layer, where restraint transforms into fire, where a hidden shadow emerges. To see this requires entering the next door, which lies covered in flame and silence. 3. The shadow dance of contrast, tenderness entwined with ferocity. Why does the union of softness and ferocity create an addiction no man can release? Because in this paradox lies the primal polarity. A woman who embodies only sweetness becomes predictable. A woman who embodies only fire becomes exhausting. But when the two are woven together, tenderness entwined with ferocity, she creates a rhythm of unpredictability that keeps a man's unconscious forever chasing equilibrium. The psychological conflict women face is the fear of contradiction. They are taught to choose a lane, be nurturing or strong, gentle or intimidating. Yet Jung reminds us that wholeness is born from integration, not fragmentation. The anima, the inner feminine archetype in a man's psyche, craves polarity. He is magnetized by the woman who can cradle him like water one moment, then cut through him like a blade the next. Why? Because she awakens his full spectrum of emotional states, forcing him to experience what he cannot find within himself alone. Unawareness of this truth leaves women trapped in one-dimensional roles. They play endlessly the sweet caretaker, loved but never desired. Or they armor themselves in constant dominance, respected but never cherished. Each role, when isolated, breeds disconnection. Men grow restless, women feel unseen, and attraction decays into obligation or stalemate. The empowered realization is that women do not need to amputate one side of their nature to be loved. They must bring shadow and light into coexistence. The woman who can smile with warmth, then look him dead in the eye with unflinching authority, is unforgettable. She embodies what Jung called the magnetism of the self, the integration of opposites. That unpredictable fusion ignites a compulsion he cannot control. The mythic imagery here is the goddess Kali, both mother and destroyer, both womb and battlefield. Men who encountered her archetype were spellbound, trembling at her ferocity, intoxicated by her protection. She was terror and sanctuary in the same breath. Visualize this within yourself, your hand holding his, soft as silk, yet your gaze unyielding, sharp as the edge of a sword. Do you feel the electricity of that duality? That paradox is the altar where obsession is born. A woman is ungraspable because she is not one thing. She is the storm and the stillness it leaves behind. Yet there is something even more devastating, a behavior that doesn't just mix tenderness and fire, but one that pulls him into dependency without him realizing it. And that is where the fourth truth emerges. 4. The siren's calm, the seduction of emotional stillness. Why does a man lose control when a woman refuses to mirror his chaos? Because his unconscious depends on her reaction to anchor him. If she mirrors his storms, she becomes his equal in volatility. But if she stands calm when he expects chaos, she becomes his sanctuary and his prison. Too many women have been conditioned to meet emotion with emotion, thinking, if I shout louder, he'll understand. If I cry harder, he'll see my pain. But this confuses expression with influence. In truth, when a woman dissolves into the same chaos as his, she hands over power. He learns that she too is ruled by storms, that she can be pushed, rattled, consumed. Respect fades, trust evaporates, desire dies where equilibrium is absent. The real seduction lies in stillness, to observe without collapsing, to breathe steadily while he unravels, to let silence stretch rather than rushing to fill it. In that restraint, he feels small against her centeredness. Jung insisted that what terrifies a man most is not a woman's anger, but her indifference. Indifference to his noise forces him to confront himself. It is a mirror he cannot escape. Without this understanding, women become emotional performers, trapped in cycles of reactivity that exhaust their energy and cheapen their spirit. They mistake drama for passion, never realizing that calm is the deadliest flame. For the woman who guards her emotional equilibrium is no longer available to manipulation. She is untouchable. The image here is the siren sitting by the ocean. She does not chase the sailor, she sings. The waves crash around her, but she remains unmoved. And it is he who drowns, not in the sea, but in obsession with the power he cannot match. Close your eyes for a moment. See yourself in an argument, but instead of trembling or raising your voice, imagine resting back, your breath even, your eyes soft but unbroken. Do you sense the shift in power? That is the intoxicating prison of your stillness. She who does not chase chaos becomes the only island men cannot leave. But just when this stillness appears unshakable, another force waits beneath, darker, forbidden, and even more irresistible. It is here that the script begins its descent into deeper waters. What would you have done in this situation? Drop it below. Your story may unlock another woman's courage. 5. The dark thrill of withdrawal. The seduction of absence. Why does a man ache more for a woman's absence than her presence? Because longing thrives in space, not saturation. The more he tastes without full possession, the more his desire binds him. Jung emphasized that the psyche does not obsess over what it fully grasps. It obsesses over what it cannot control. The conflict here is ancient. Many women are taught that to keep a man, they must give him constant access, perpetual availability, endless attention. They believe presence equals devotion. Yet this devotion often sabotages attraction itself. For when every call is answered, every message instantly replied to, every hour made accessible, he no longer feels the addictive sting of her loss. He no longer fears she could walk away. From this unawareness, a cycle of exhaustion is born. Women sacrifice their own time, their purpose, their friendships, just to ensure his constant contact. And yet, paradoxically, the more present they are, the more absent he becomes. He pulls back, unconsciously starving for the paradox she denies him. Tension born of her distance. The empowered solution is withdrawal, not as childish games, but as sovereign ritual. A woman of depth values solitude. She is capable of vanishing into her own world, and in doing so, she seduces more than any text or touch ever could. Jungian shadow work teaches that absence forces projection. In her silence, he begins to imagine, to crave, to obsess. She allows him to hunger. The mythic metaphor here is Persephone, vanishing each year into the underworld. The earth itself withered in her absence, desperate for her return. Men, too, wither in the absence of a woman whose essence they once inhaled but cannot clutch forever. This rhythm of disappearance and return trains his nervous system to associate her with both grief and ecstasy. It binds him unconsciously. Now visualize this. You step back, not with bitterness, but with grace. You do not explain your absence. You do not apologize for your silence. You vanish into your passions, your rituals, your queenship. Do you feel the hunger this creates, the way he leans closer into the void you left? That is not cruelty. That is sovereign gravity. She who dares to walk away becomes the axis of his return. But there is an even sharper blade, not just the absence of her body, but the unflinching presence of her standards. This burns hotter than absence itself, and that is the next truth. 6. The blade of boundaries. The sexiest word is no. Why does rejection slice deeper than seduction? Because when a man hears no, he confronts a force stronger than his desire, her self-respect. In that moment, attraction transforms from shallow chase into reverence. Yet so many women fear this word. Conditioned to please, to keep peace, to maintain connection, they avoid firmness. They fear that saying no will repel men, lose affection, or invite abandonment. In truth, this people-pleasing only drains them of allure. A woman without boundaries becomes endlessly consumable, and consumption never breeds devotion, only depletion. The cost is brutal. In relationships without boundaries, men test limits endlessly. They lose respect, women lose themselves. What begins as passion decays into resentment, exhaustion, and invisibility. A man cannot stay chained to a woman who refuses to chain herself to her own dignity. Empowerment lives in the refusal. When a woman draws her lines, she transforms the entire dynamic. Boundaries ignite attraction because they communicate value. I am worth protecting. I am not yours to devour endlessly. Jung pointed out that individuation means separating one's identity from others, claiming wholeness. That act in relationships looks like a clear, unapologetic no. The metaphor is Artemis, goddess of the hunt. Men desired her, yet could never touch her because her boundaries were sacred. Anyone who tried to violate them paid the price, and it was precisely this untouchability that kept her image burning through myth across centuries. A boundary is not a wall. It is a crown. Picture yourself now. A man tries to cross your line. Instead of explaining, justifying, or trembling, you look him in the eye and say, no. Do you feel the sharpness, the power, in that moment? Notice how his energy shifts, how something inside him respects even what it resists. That is the power of the blade. The most irresistible woman is the one who cannot be bought, broken, or begged into self-betrayal. But boundaries do not exist alone. They are not the end. They are the threshold. For women who hold them unlock an even greater force, the ability to mirror back a man's own secret wounds. That forbidden mirror awaits in the next descent. 7. The mirror of his shadow. Becoming the reflection he cannot escape. Why does a man fear the woman who reflects his wounds more than the one who tempts his body? Because to stand before her presence is to face himself. and no one truly escapes the mirror. The conflict most women face is tragic. They shrink away from intensity, softening themselves so as not to disturb, bite their tongue so as not to make him uncomfortable. Yet Jung wrote that every relationship is a psychic container. It is not love alone, but projection meeting projection. The man does not see the woman as she is. He sees himself in her, filtered through the archetype she ignites. And if she dares to hold his gaze long enough, she reveals to him his shadow, his buried fear, his hidden wounds, his unacknowledged hunger. The danger here is profound. A woman unaware of this power becomes a receptacle for his denied self. She absorbs his anger, bears his insecurity, becomes a dumping ground for his unprocessed wounds. She believes it is love when in fact it is projection. She loses her sense of self, drowning beneath his reflection until she cannot separate her soul from his shadow. But the empowered woman does not dissolve. She reflects. She does not carry his wounds for him. She becomes the mirror that forces him to carry them himself. When he rages, she remains unwavering. When he gaslights, she holds calmly to reality. When he projects, she does not collapse into his narrative. Instead, without words, she becomes the glass in which his truth shatters back upon him. That power is unbearable, irresistible, inescapable. The mythic image here is Medusa. Men gazed at her and were turned to stone because they saw themselves in eyes that revealed too much. She was neither monster nor victim, but pure reflection. The gaze that penetrates illusion, freezing those who cannot withstand truth. Visualize this now. A man standing in front of you, anger in his voice, excuses on his tongue. You neither cry nor argue. You simply look silently into his eyes. He begins to stumble over his words. His tone falters. Why? Because he sees himself, naked in the reflection you hold. That silence cuts deeper than any scream. You cannot enslave the woman who has become your mirror, for in escaping her, you only run into yourself. But mirrors alone awaken fear. To both terrify and enthrall, there is one final, devastating key: the enchantment of devotion to a force greater than him. This is where sovereign seduction reaches the divine. 8. The untouchable devotion, loving a vision beyond him. Why is the most seductive woman the one who does not place him at the center of her universe? Because no man can eclipse a woman who is devoted to something greater than him. Her power comes not from neediness, but from alignment with destiny itself. Here lies the greatest contradiction women struggle with. Many believe that to secure love, they must make the man their axis, their sun, their God. They orbit him, invest every dream into him, dissolve their individuality into his purpose. But Jung warns that when the anima, the feminine principle, is tied solely to another, her entire inner world collapses. She becomes dependent, trapped, emptied of her own fire. And paradoxically, the man loses interest, for what he truly craves is not worship, but the ungraspable radiance of a woman whose devotion burns toward life itself. The unaware woman suffers most here. She gives away her soul and then wonders why he drifts. She becomes fuel for his ego, but starves her own selfhood. The result is bitterness, loneliness, and the slow erosion of her spirit. The empowered woman reverses this completely. She places her devotion not in him, but in something eternal, her craft, her art, her calling, her goddess within. When a man realizes he is invited to walk beside that vision, but never replace it, he is ensnared not by flattery, but by reverence. He knows her essence is larger than his grasp, that her love is freedom, not enslavement. And this paradox binds him tighter than submission ever could. The archetypal image here is the Oracle of Delphi. Kings traveled across nations, desperate for her words, yet none could own her. She belonged to the divine currents, not to mortal men. And it was this very untouchability that made her sacred beyond possession. Imagine yourself now, radiant not because of who desires you, but because you are aligned with what your soul burns for. See him standing beside you, captivated, not by the illusion that he owns you, but by the terror and awe of knowing he never fully can. It is here desire becomes devotion, not because you needed him, but because you did not. She who walks her path without apology becomes eternal in the eyes that watch her pass. And here, at the threshold of shadow and sovereignty, the story of feminine seduction does not end. For every revelation is not the closing of a door, but the opening of another, darker, higher, untouchable. Quick recap of the 8 dangerous truths. Mystery. Desire is born from the unseen. What is withheld becomes eternal in the mind. Restraint. Power lives in the pause. What you do not reveal becomes hunger itself. Contrast. Softness entwined with ferocity awakens the whole man. He both trembles and adores. Stillness. Chaos breaks against the woman who does not move. Her silence binds more than screams. Absence. The vanishing queen becomes his obsession. Longing grows sharp where presence was withdrawn. Boundaries. The word no is the crown. Rejection cuts deeper into his soul than any embrace. Mirror. To see himself in her gaze is to face the shadow he fears. She is the truth he cannot escape. Devotion. A woman given to her higher path is untouchable. Love follows her, but sovereignty defines her. Each of these is not a performance, but an awakening, a return to the ancient shape of feminine power that Jung warned modernity has forgotten. It is not seduction as trickery, but seduction as sovereignty. It is not the hunger to be chosen, but the stillness of choosing yourself first. For the truth is devastating. The man is never your prison. Your real prison is the self you abandon to keep him. When you weave mystery, restraint, contrast, stillness, absence, boundaries, the mirror, and devotion, you do not control him. You liberate yourself. And in that liberation, he falls. Not because you tried to hold him, but because you finally refused to hold yourself small. The feminine in her shadow is dangerous. The feminine in her wholeness is eternal. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This is your call to stop mistaking submission for love, to stop leaking power in exchange for validation, to turn inward, burn shadow into gold, and rise not as an object of desire, but as the axis of your own world. Your silence isn't weakness. Your mystery isn't manipulation. Your restraint isn't coldness. Each of them is sacred rebellion, the descent into the self. The question is not if a man can escape you. The question is whether you will finally escape yourself. So take this as your initiation, not into games, not into masks, but into sovereignty. Let your archetypal power breathe again, the maiden, the siren, the mother, the mystic, the destroyer, all threads of you that men cannot devour, because they are not meant for them. They are meant for you. Your shadow is not your shame. It is the altar upon which your true power is crowned. Subscribe to Jung Mind, where your shadow speaks, and your soul finally listens. And now ask yourself softly, dangerously, what part of you is still performing just to be loved?